Hello, Rufus. Good to see you tonight.
Thank you.
Doing?
Yes, it's good. All good.
Lovely. All right. Well, we're not going to waste time. We're just going to get going. So I'm going to share my screen with you, so we can get ourselves going. Okay. So what you should be seeing now is a VCA Training 2023 Lesson 2. All right. And we're all set to go, except that I haven't got my keyboard ready. Here we go. Right. So what I've assumed is that you'd have had a chance to have a look at the notes. So I'm not going to sit and read the notes to you. I'm trying to highlight things that are, I think, that are important. So if you have a pen or pencil, the slides come generally from the notes, and so you're quite welcome simply to put a little star next to each little bit that I've highlighted as being important. So when we look at all different types of chaplaincy, and you can think about them all, there's prison chaplaincy, there's school chaplaincy, there's university chaplaincy, there's prison chaplaincy, and all of them have certain forms of common elements. And there they are: privacy and confidentiality, without a doubt the most important. The third one down, understanding the institution in which we work. And I think you can understand quite simply that if you don't know the rules and regulations of the hospital, then they're not going to let you work there. So I spoke about that last week. When you do the induction programs on the internet, they will provide you with the information that you need to know as to how to work within the hospital. So things like what to do in the event of a fluid spillage, what to do when you're trying to assist a patient, in fact, what you're not supposed to do, and to make yourself safe within the hospital. So we're, sorry, I'm going to just ask Legion and Rufus, can you put your cameras on again, please? I'd like to be able to see you as we go through. Thank you. So those things are important for us to do, and you'll get a chance to do those through the DHB, through the hospital, once our training is finished. The next things that are really important as far as chaplaincy is concerned is respect for the people that you're working with. And there are various ways of saying it: attentive listening, some call it active listening, but the ability to listen for people, particularly to try and pick up the things that are of concern to them. So the four little sayings that I want you to try and think about, I'm trying to put this into my hand: sad, mad, glad, angry. Right? Sad, mad, glad, angry. So when you're talking to a person, you're listening for words, phrases, sentences which indicate that they're glad about something, or they're mad about something, or they're sad about something, or they're angry. And the reason you're looking for those is because that gives you the avenue through which you will continue into a partial conversation, and we'll have more about a partial conversation later on. The last one there, recognition and acceptance of differences. This is hugely important for us because most of us will come from a very staunch Christian background, but the people we encounter may not be in that same framework. And so we have to recognize and accept all differences, not only in beliefs, but values, lifestyle, culture, and ethnicity. So those are really important. Okay, continuing. When we look at a pastoral encounter, our main focus is always on the person, in our case, the patient. And I think the next two things are really important for us to remember. The first is that sharing your own story is usually inappropriate. In a normal social conversation, we'll get to the point where someone says, I did this and I did that, and your mind immediately says, oh, I did something similar. Or yes, when I did that, something else happened. You've actually got to try to stifle that part of the interaction. Your story is inappropriate. There are very, very few circumstances in which you are encountering a patient in which revealing what happened to you becomes something that's worthwhile saying. It's all about them. And then the last one is we're there to be with them where they are, not where we would like them to be. So we're not evangelizing, we're not proclaiming, and we're certainly not trying to convert them. So just be aware of those two. And if we say it over and over again, maybe we'll remember it. So as a pastoral minister, we have the process of being, in other words, in presence in their company, being the good news and being the bearer of good news. And we do that simply because we provide human contact. Now, this morning I went to visit a patient, and the patient had in fact lost her mother recently, and that was the sole support person left in the world. Her partner had died some years ago, and so she was bereft of any support of any description. So we need to just be aware that our presence might be the sort of thing they're just desperate to have. Many of them will actually hold your hand, even though we'll say to you, don't hold hands. They will want to hold your hand because they need and crave that physical contact. And in doing so, you alleviate loneliness, which is hugely important as far as a chaplain is concerned. Again, we're highlighting listening. So they're telling the story, and we listen empathetically and reflectively. We give clarity and celebration to this person's story. Now, when they tell you the story, there will be times where you think, my gosh, I hope that never happens to me, or I hope I'm not like that. Again, you put that to the side, and you're listening and celebrating their story, particularly to the fact that they are prepared to share their story with you. Sometimes they will express anxiety about some aspect of their treatment. You're there, if the opportunity arises in that case, to provide them with information, provided you know it. I think, Patsy, you'd be in a better position than most of us, knowing some sort of medical background. But again, it's not your role to be the medical person, it's your role to be the one who just provides the support. Last night, I was called to Auckland Hospital to provide support for the family of a person who had died. And so you're there telling them what to do in the case of a person dying. What happens next? You know, contact the funeral director. Make sure you know where to find the body of your beloved in the morgue. Make sure you've got a pastor ready to celebrate the funeral. And you get the pastor in place first before you get the funeral director in place. You know, little things like that you'll pick up over time, and which you pass on to the family of a deceased person. And I think all of us would welcome the next one. We're there to provide prayer. A little bit closer to your commissioning, we will share a little booklet that we have. And that booklet actually has all the prayers that you need. Sorry. So this is my little booklet, and it has all the prayers I need inside. Okay, so that's coming your way. We won't leave you destitute as far as prayer is concerned, but you'll have it and you use it to the best of your ability. And for those of you that will encounter people who require sacraments, one of the jobs that you'll be doing is organizing for them to celebrate the sacraments. So a little bit of work from that point of view. Next, we need to look at each person as the image of God. And that sometimes can be quite difficult. But one of the things that I use is, I always say to myself as I go to a new person, and I don't say it out loud, good morning or good afternoon, God. Good morning or good afternoon, Lord. Something along those lines, just to make my focus on the fact that I'm looking at a child of God. And remember that in Scripture it tells us, whatever you do to the least of my brethren, you do to me. So in looking at this person as an individual, we've got to recognize that they think rationally, even if they've got dementia. They still think rationally. They are people who like to make the choices for themselves. We're not there to make choices for them. And we've got to remember that our behavior must keep their emotions in contact. We're not there to cause emotional upheaval for them. Okay? In our reflective listening, we need to identify their issues. A little bit later on, as I said, we'll have a look at the difference between a social conversation and a pastoral conversation. And that's for us to get our heads around, how do we move a conversation into the pastoral realm before we leave a patient. The next part, helping a person to find or use their own resources. They're all internal. They're all in the person already. They may have, for example, that there's a family member who's coming to see them. That might be a resource for support. But we've got to get them to establish where they need that. You can't be the resource for that. Okay, so a patient asks me to contact their pastor. I say to them, I'll make one phone call. If I manage to get the person, well and good, but I'm not going to make a second phone call. We'll need to get one of your support people to come in and do that. Another little story. In my early days, I was requested by one of the patients to provide, among other things, a packet of biscuits. Now, you try finding a packet of biscuits in a hospital on a Sunday. What I'm saying by that example is that people will ask you all sorts of things. You've got to feel absolutely confident that you know it's not your role to provide a packet of biscuits. It's not for you to get in your car and drive to the local shop, purchase the biscuits and come back. That's not your role. So just be aware of where your boundary is. And again, this is early days. You'll have lots of time to discuss boundaries later on. The last bullet point there, enabling the person to change, that's part of your role. But they're the ones that are indicating that there's a desire to change. You might point to where they might, what they might consider, but you're not there to demand they change in a particular way. So the idea is that you're there to let them talk their issue through into the position of making whatever changes they need to make. So what are your jobs as a committed VCA? Well, again, coming straight out of the book, you're a minister of loving service. Everything you do is done in love. And it's not only in love of God, but it's in love of the person you're encountering. Even if they seem to evidence every bit of behaviors that are antagonistic or out of your own framework of acceptance. You are there to use whatever training you get and whatever training you have. And you remember last week I said to you, everybody's got the experience. So we're not asking you to get additional experience. We're saying use the experience you've got, whatever training you've got, and you're using it for the good of the person that you're speaking to in the hospital. As a VCA, you will respond to a call for help that normally comes from the fact that You've spoken to one person in the room and somebody across the room asks you to come and speak to them. Right? That's the sort of call for help that we're talking about. We're not expecting you to answer the telephone and come rushing to the hospital to come and see someone. Now that may happen if you become a locum chaplain, but it's not as a VCA. And remember that in your response to their seeking for help, you're never trying to persuade or convert. You're there simply to support them as they deal with the issues, as they raise them and see them. And the best response I've heard for most people is, oh yeah, good on you. In other words, you're not saying anything, you're just acknowledging and you're putting the question mark at the end of the word. Right? In other words, you're getting them to answer the question they've set for themselves. I mentioned this last time as well, but the fourth one there, maintaining your personal integrity, is really, really important. You'll come into the hospital and you'll be spending maybe 2 to 2.5 hours here, and you may encounter someone who really requires an emotional input from you, and so there's an emotional expense on your part. You don't want to put yourself in the position where you've got a second round of emotional expense that you're facing. You need to be sure that you're able to cope with what you faced already before going on to the next one. Fortunately, it doesn't happen often, but it can happen, and you need to know that self-care, if you can't look after yourself and if you're not sure of yourself, you're not going to be able to help the person you're encountering. Okay, what are some of the practical considerations you're going to have as an ICHC person? Well, the first one is you are an ICHC person. We work under the banner of the ICHC. So what they tell us holds. And there are a couple of things that'll mean, and I'll come to those in a while. The other thing that you have to know are the policies of the hospital. And now we've got this huge conglomerate called Health New Zealand, Te Whata Ora. We've got to know their policies. Now, last week we had a look at some of those in terms of health and safety. So that gives you an idea of what it is that's required. But again, remember that it's going to come to you in those online induction programs, which we will do at the end of our training. Always maintain your standards high. In that way, you're making sure that you're not putting yourself in a position where something untoward can happen for you. I've not experienced anything major in the time that I've been a chaplain here where somebody's done something wrong, but it usually starts to come about the fact that you have expressed an opinion on something the patient has said from your lens to life as opposed to their lens to life. All right. So, for example, we had training last week from a member of the LGBTQIA+ community. Some fundamental Christians will regard homosexuality as totally sinful, whereas the LGBT community don't see it as sinful. And you can imagine what would happen if you expressed the view that the person you were speaking to, who you know as LGBT, was sinning. Well, you can just appreciate the difficulty that that would create. So you don't do that sort of thing at all. You don't pass the opinion based from your framework onto them. So I suppose that means you're always respecting the person's minor, and that means you're respecting their dignity, you're respecting their privacy, their culture, and their beliefs. And then the last one that we need to just be aware of is that the treaty hangs over our heads as an umbrella under which we will operate throughout the way. So we've got to be absolutely conscious of the fact that we serve all people with equity and with all those love. Right, so an overview of the tasks that you'll do as a chaplain. We gather each Thursday, and each Thursday, because we will read some scripture, discuss it, we pray for each other, and we support each other before going into the wards. It doesn't mean to say that you have to come on a Thursday, but we like everybody to be here on a Thursday for that time of prayer together. The way it was done in the past, mainly because of COVID and what have you, you come the day of the week that you're available to come. And we try to support you as best we can on that day. So at the moment, we have VCAs that come Sunday through to Saturday. And so I'm sure that you'll be given the same opportunity. But the gathering together on a Thursday morning is definitely there for us to have a chance to support everyone and one another. The other thing that you'll have to do as a VCA is record your statistics. Now, that's for the ICHC, and it's called RVA, which is results-based accounting. And what that means is you count the number of patients that you've spoken to in the morning, or however long you're here. You record the ethnicity. And I think for now that's enough. There's a couple of other things that you need to remember. But you're recording what it is you are doing with each patient. So you could be blessing them, you could be praying with them, whatever happens. And you then record that so that the ICHC can report to the Ministry of Health in order to validate the Ministry of Health's expenditure on chaplaincy services. So ICHC contract to the Ministry of Health to provide chaplaincy services for which the Ministry of Health pays, and they report back on what we do as a way of justifying the continuation of that payment. And last on that list there, certainly not the least, it's probably the one you'll do most often, your job is to visit patients. So prayer here, visit patients are the two big things that we're looking at as far as that goes from there. Okay with that?
Mm-hmm.
Please feel free to just raise your hand and ask a question, because otherwise I'll just keep going, and I'm quite happy to keep going. All right, we'll carry on. This is the big surprise. What will you be doing? First and foremost, waiting alongside somebody. We'll be there just sitting and letting them talk. You'll be doing that an awful lot, but it's not the only thing you'll do. You'll be accompanying. So if they're telling you about a difficult journey that they're following, you're on that journey with them, right? Giving them the help that they need, or the support that they need, or the assurance that they need that what they're doing is right. You'll also be assisting them with despair and loss. Right? So that presupposes that they're talking to you about something that they've lost, usually the death of a loved one, right? Or the fact that their partner has just left them and they don't know where to go, particularly now that they're sick. Some of them will even go to the point of indicating to you that they've lost all hope, in which case that becomes a really important thing to be with them, to negotiate their way back into hope. You'll also assist with spiritual transition. In other words, they might say to them, oh my gosh, I need to get back closer to God, and you can start to help them. That usually that's with prayer. You'll assist them with the trauma of ill health, assuring them that God loves them without hesitation, and that it is to Him that they can turn with the problems of their ill health. Now, whatever you do, don't promise on behalf of God that they're going to get cured, right? God's big enough to cure them himself. He doesn't need us to promise on his behalf. So we simply say, turn to God and ask. But we never put it into their minds that simply by asking, a cure is going to come. Because let's be honest, nobody comes to hospital because they want to. And those that do come to hospital want to get out as quickly as possible. And in terms of the people that come to see them, last on the list is a chaplain, because they want to see a doctor who's going to give them a pill or whatever it is they're going to give them, so they're cured and they can get out. So we've got to understand that we're last in the queue when it comes to people wanting to speak to us. You will find that very often you'll be confused with for being a doctor. So you'll go to the bedside, you'll say, hello, my name's Arthur. And they say, hello, doctor. And you've got to say, I'm sorry, I'm not a doctor. Oh, you look like a doctor. Oh, I'm not a doctor. Oh, why not? Yeah. So you'll, I hope you don't get too many of those, but that does happen because you try to get the word in quickly. I'm a chaplain. And they say, oh, okay, fine. I have a little patter, which when I'm reasonably sure that the person's not all that comfortable, I always say to them, there's an international signal that you need to know. And they'll look at you. I say, yes, it's the signal to tell a chaplain to leave your bed when you don't want them here. So, again, the quizzical look will come over. You just say, off you go. It breaks the ice, and they feel comfortable to tell you, look, I'm okay now. I'm good. Thank you for coming. It just allows them to keep control of the conversation. And as you'll see later on, there's a power imbalance in what we do because they can't leave and they don't initiate the conversation. We initiate it because we come into them and we can leave more or less when we want to. Right? So there's a power imbalance which we need to learn to control. Okay, so you'll also assist with the conflict they feel between their beliefs and their treatments. Many of you will think of Jehovah's Witnesses who are not allowed to have blood transfusions and through their beliefs, and yet the doctors will tell them that the blood transfusion is something they have to have. And then if we're coming on something like that, then they're the ones that do their discussion with you, and you help them come to a conclusion as to whether they're going to go with the doctor or whether they're going to stay with their beliefs. The whole way through, you're applying sensitivity. And I think that goes without saying. Most of you in your interviews showed sensitivity in bucket loads, so I'm not terribly worried about it at all. But just be aware that you've got to apply it every time we go in. There's conflicts that arise between their suffering and their beliefs. People will say to you, I prayed and prayed and prayed for a cure, and God hasn't given it to me. So they're obviously suffering, and their beliefs are such that they were hoping that God would create a miracle for them. And you've got to help them negotiate that difficulty for themselves. One of the things that comes up reasonably frequently is the realization that they're helpless, particularly among the elderly patients who can no longer walk, or who can no longer go to the toilet on their own, or shower on their own. Things that they have taken for granted for most of their life. And now they're in a situation where they cannot do that, or they're relying on somebody else. And if you find someone like that, you're happy to help them just come to some resolution of the helplessness they might feel. One of the things that I use in that case is a realization that Jesus gives us the opportunity as we get older to rely on him and him alone. So we've got to grow from the time where we feel that our own expertise and challenge and qualities and whatever you are enough. In other words, we're self-sufficient. We don't need God. To the point as life comes towards its end, a realization that we need God and only God. So it's quite an important learning, but it's a tough one for people who have been independent certainly physically independent for so long. One of the ones you'll definitely get to do is pray. Really, really an important part of what we do. And the last one, this may not happen very often, but some of them may ask you to get hold of a priest for them or a pastor. This can happen, particularly with Buddhist people. Buddhist people come from different temples, so you would need to find out which temple they come from, and then we contact that temple. It's not like some of the Christian churches who might say, for example, I'm Anglican, and you can get any Anglican priest to come in to speak to them. You've actually got to go specifically to that temple to get the person who's going to give them the support or the pastoral help they need. Okay, so that's summary of what it is we're going to be doing together. So, hugely important. Privacy and confidentiality. And there are general rules that we can cite with regard to those. And again, if you're wanting greater detail, I invite you to make sure you just read the manual. I'm highlighting the important bits. You can read the details to make sure that you've got them intact. But when it comes to confidentiality and privacy, make sure you take good care of information you become aware of. Most of you will not be ever given a list of patients that you're going to visit. You'll simply be given a ward. And what you'll then do is on the entry to the ward, there is a list of the names of all the patients that are there. So you might, for example, get Smith Jones on both sides, for example. And you then know at least the surname of the person that you're going to speak to. And when you leave, you can record that you spoke to Mr. Jones, who happened to be a European and looked like he was over 90. All right, some little information about that. So you make it just a little record for yourself as to what it is. What's more important is that if you speak to Mr. Jones and the conversation took a turn that you weren't comfortable in, right? In other words, you've been presented with a situation in which you think that person needs to be seen by your supervising chaplain, or you think that person needs a little bit extra. That's the note you make. So when you come to visit your chaplain at the end of your shift, you can pass that information on. Okay. So it might be, for example, that you come across a Presbyterian person who would like to receive communion. None of us in the hospital is authorized to give communion to a Presbyterian person. And you might say, well, look, I'm going to just tell the chaplain that you want it. We will then arrange for a Presbyterian minister to come in with communion for that particular person. It doesn't happen often, but you've got to know that your first port of call for any help is your supervising chaplain. And as we go through the training, or towards the end of the training, you will be allocated to one of the three of us as your supervising chaplain. And so we will meet with you every week that you come in, on the day that you come in, just to make sure that you're okay. Another thing, if you come across some information that you think might be salacious, you never heard it. So you keep things to yourself. You don't, look, I think all of us are fully aware that our experience of confidentiality is that you don't tell anybody anything, and that's the way to go. Be aware of accidental disclosures, particularly among yourselves. Right? Accidental disclosures, you think that, well, I'll just share this little bit of information. Just always think twice. As I said, you're not going to get too much paperwork, but if you do get paperwork, don't leave it lying around. If you carry a little notebook in which to record your interviews or your patient visits, don't leave it lying around, especially when you get home. And one of the things that you'll learn and that I still do today, in the RBA, that's when we're reporting to the ICAC, there's a little section which is called a narrative, in which you write down what happened in an interesting interview. And when you write it down, you never reveal the person's name, and you never reveal the specifics of their ailments. So if you, for example, put a person's name in, the people who read your narratives, and there's really only the ICHC head honchos, they must not be able to identify who that person is, because that's breaking confidentiality. Okay? There's a whole thing in your booklets on the privacy laws in the country. Look, just be aware that they're there. Nothing of them really pertains specifically to being a hospital chaplain that I haven't highlighted here. All right? So read it as a matter of interest rather than feeling that you need to learn it off by heart or anything along those lines. Those are just, that's just what the Privacy Action or the Privacy Commissioner, I think it is, wants us to know about. All right? So the use of information can only be for what you're doing in the work. So I've not found anybody that's had difficulty with information that they've come up with. So far, so good?
Yes.
Yep. Okay. Nobody's saying no. Stacey, you're nodding? Yeah, good. Okay.
Yep,
Right.
all good here. Thank you.
Right, fantastic. Hong, you okay? You'd know that.
Yep.
All right. So Hong, I'm so sorry that your voice isn't right yet, but don't talk. I understand it. Hope it comes. There are times when confidentiality might appear to be compromised. So here are a couple of cases. The Health Information Privacy Code tells you that you may disclose. And remember, it's a may, not a must. You may disclose where the information you've learned is necessary to prevent serious or imminent threat to life or health. Okay? Even if that is the person's own health or life, you may need to disclose it. Again, my solution for you is refer to your supervising chaplain. So if you've heard it, remember it, record it if you have to, but tell your chaplain and we'll deal with it from there on. If you want to continue with it, then ask our permission, only because we'll talk to you about it and make sure that you're on the right track and feeling confident in where you go. It's not because we want to take things away from you. It's our support of you that's in harness there. And non-compliance is necessary to avoid prejudice to maintain maintenance of the law. Okay, so if you're coming up against something that's illegal, you've got a pretty serious thing to think about. You know, if, for example, you find out from the patient they're stealing drugs from the ward storeroom or something along those lines, I think you need to let your supervising chaplain know so we can get on with it. All right, but I think for you, as a rule of thumb, don't reveal to anybody but your supervising chaplain, and the supervising chaplain is always going to be confidential with you. Right? It doesn't go out of the room that we're in. The idea being, we're there to support you and to help you negotiate any difficulties you might have. And then the last point there, only disclose what's necessary to prevent the threat. Okay, and I don't know what the and bit is. Oh, sorry, got myself carried away here. All right, we have a couple of situations. These come again from the booklet, but let's talk about them. So your microphones are off, and your microphones are now ready to talk, and we're going to discuss these for a bit. So you are asked to see Polly. She is quite tearful, believing she is not going to survive her surgery tomorrow. She tells you she wants to get something off her chest. She used to be a drug dealer selling pee. You have a niece who is a pee addict and know firsthand the havoc that it can cause. Everybody happy with the scenario?
Yeah.
It may well be something that you're ready to would encounter. The question we have to ask ourselves is, would it be okay for you to call the police and advise them of the disclosure?
No.
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 Anybody saying yes?
No.
Good. Bingo, you get it. You don't disclose that. All right. A number of little grounds that can come up. You're not sure that she is a pee dealer, or that she was a pee dealer. She might be just bragging. You know, and in the end, that's not information that needs to go anywhere. But things can get complicated. Polly has children at home, and you worry that they may be at risk. What should you do?
Can discuss about the supervising chaplain.
Yes.
Yeah.
Good answer. Get down to the supervising chaplain quickly.
Also, in the hospital, they have other facilities like as I'm working in the hospital, they can contact the social workers to deal with it.
Rufus,
But in this,
please.
what happens is in the other departmental workers, they will call the social workers
Yes.
to deal with this kind of issues. But in the chaplaincy, we don't deal with them straight away.
No, you leave it to your supervising chaplain to call the social worker.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, that's the general route that all of us take.
Okay.
But when we're looking at it for you now, you worry that there may be a risk. Okay. There's no risk until it's proved that there is a risk. Okay. So you're responding only to your worry, and your worry is, how do I get the help that person needs if it's reliable? And I think you're quite right, Rufus. Supervising chaplain, let them worry about it.
Yep. Thank you.
You meet one of the other VCAs outside the chapel. You are alone, and it's an opportunity to discuss your concerns. Would you discuss the matter with your colleague? Now, that's another VCA, not your supervising chaplain.
I don't think so.
Bingo, we hit it, right? So privacy and confidentiality is really important. There are very, very few occasions in which you can break confidence. And if you keep that as a rule of thumb, you're going to be fine. Here's another one. You visit an elderly man who you are told has only days to live. The man is crying. He tells you he is dying, and he's very worried about his wife, who has dementia and is very dependent upon him. She will not be able to cope without me. Over the course of the 10 minutes you are with him, he changes from being sad to being quite energized. Finally, he looks at you and says, "Do you think God would judge me harshly if I took her with me?" It dawns on you that he's thinking about killing his wife. What should you do?
I think you're back to your supervising chaplaincy. Lay it on him. Lay it on you, Mark.
Yeah, lay it on us. Yeah, but in effect, that's one area where we will make sure that something's done about that. Okay. We would break that confidence. You would know fully well before we did it that we would have to go and tell social workers about that.
Yeah.
Okay, that's one of those areas where his life is in danger because he's just about dead, but it's his wife's life that is the crucial element there. A third situation, you know one of the nurses on the ward to which you are assigned. The two of you often chat, you really like her, and know she's been going through a rough time. One morning you stop for a chat and become very alarmed because she is slurring her words and smells strongly of alcohol. You ask if she has been drinking. Only a couple, she responds, and starts giggling and moves off, tripping over the rubbish bin as she goes. You
Yeah.
feel terrible, as you really like her and don't want to get her into trouble. But you are worried for the patients on the ward under her care. What do you do?
So you have to go to your supervising chaplaincy chaplain, or yeah.
You'd have,
I'd be surprised if it hadn't been picked up by her colleagues.
yeah, that's the beauty of being able to manufacture a scenario. Because I quite agree with you. There's no nurse operating in this hospital who, being slightly under the weather, would not have been picked up long before you were in. But what it is letting you know is a situation where harm could happen to some patients because they are possibly in jeopardy from a drunk nurse. I've got to be honest, I've never heard of a drunk nurse while I've been here. So she may have been drunk outside of the hospital, but not while she's been here. Right. We're looking now at biblical references with regard to that. Now, I'm not going to read them. They are all in your manual, so you can either read them or you can take the reference and read them from your Bible. But we know that our Lord came to heal people. Right. So we take our cue from him. Okay. So he cured them spiritually and physically. Well, we can only do or work towards a spiritual healing. That would be our major goal. We're not here to be critiques or not here to offer criticism of the medical staff who decided what or not. We don't even go into discussions with the patient about what their medical treatment is. They might divulge it to you. And a simple case, I was with, I think she's 88, and she was livid when she spoke to me, absolutely angry. I didn't even have to think about it. You could just tell anger was all over her face. They're not listening to me, she said. So I said, well, tell me a bit about it. My pain is at the back of my leg, and they're treating me for a pain in my thigh. They got it wrong. So I said, did you tell them about the back of their leg? Of course I told them about the back of the leg. They just don't listen to me. They think I'm stupid. Yeah, and so the conversation went. And you've got to they give you a little bit of information about what their complaint is, what their treatment is, and you just say, yes, sir, no, sir, 3 bags full, sir. And you don't pass comment about whether or not the doctor should or hasn't done the right thing, or the nurse hasn't come at the right time. And just by the way, the nurses here are frantic most of the day. There's a shortage, and they wear their heart on their sleeves because very often they can't get to everybody they want to get to. But anyway, have a look at those excerpts from Scripture, just to be assured that the role you're playing is the role that Jesus would have you play.
Nice.
Okay, this is one of the things that I found very interesting. Kirkwood's 11 Theologies of Pastoral Care. I didn't even think there were that many to be found, to be very honest. But anyway, he did. He got them. So let's just have a quick look at them, because they give us some wider understanding of our role. So the first one is the theology of acceptance. Okay, so when you accept that when you're going in, you don't care who's on the bed. There's no criteria the patient on the bed has to meet for you to accept them as a person or a child of God. Right? It's just acceptance. No question about it. Okay, and the acceptance goes one step further. Is that in accepting them as a child of God, you know that they're suffering in some way. And so you're accepting them at that level. The next one is the theology of availability. I have a supervisor who tells me that the only thing that I've got that the doctors and the nurses haven't got to give a patient is time. Right? They have got a patient they're seeing now, and then they're going to go to a patient in 5 minutes' time or another one in 10 minutes' time. They've got one after another, whereas a chaplain doesn't have one after another. Yes, you might see another patient after you've seen the one you're talking to, but you don't have to see that second patient. The time that you've got is devoted to the patient you're speaking to. And when that conversation dies a natural death, that's when you go on to the next one. So there's no pressure on you. Time is what all chaplains have to give to their patient. The theology of accountability. You're responsible to ensure that the patient is left in a better position than when you arrived. Right? Your accountability is, have I made sure that I haven't damaged this person in any way, made them upset in any way, done something that's exacerbated the problem they're facing? You just, you've got to be accountable to the fact that you're there to improve their lot. The next one is a theology of care. Okay, and I think that's fairly self-explanatory. Many people are isolated when they're in hospital. They don't want to be there, and you become the contact mainly with God, because you'll pray to God for them, and they relish that contact. But the fact that their isolation is somewhat alleviated by your visit is hugely important. The next one is a theology of love. And I don't think that requires too much in the way of explanation. But we know that God is love. And we're there operating as his hands, his eyes, his ears, his feet. And so we operate as his love too. And so we operate from a position of love. And it's unequivocal. The next one is a theology of confrontation. Seems a bit odd to have that one. But when a patient says something that is obviously wrong, our job is to confront that wrong. Okay? An example. I've been such a bad person, God will never forgive me. Right? Wrong. There's nothing that a person can possibly do that God can't forgive. And so you've got to confront that erroneous thought. Okay, something a little less spiritual. I'm allowed to do what I want to do in a ward when there are 3 other people in the ward. If I want to sing and shout and scream, I can do that. Wrong. You've got to confront the fact that they're in a social situation within the ward, and they've got to be considerate of the other people. They may not believe you, but you still got to confront it. That's the issue there. Okay. A theology of renewal is the next one. That's your renewal. Okay. You need to be sure that you are 100% ready to go into the wards. You don't want to come into the wards feeling down. Something's happened in your life that is playing on your mind. You must be able to put all the things that are influential in your life at that moment to one side before you go into the wards. So if anything is playing on your mind and you're here at the hospital, talk to your supervisor and chaplain about it. Okay, in other words, let them be the chaplain to you in your need. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay. The next one is a renewal of, or a theology, sorry, of sensitivity. You've got to be sensitive to everybody's demands, but you can't promise anything on behalf of God. You can promise that God loves them. You can promise that God will be next to them in their suffering. You can promise that all things that God has promised his people, that he will be there next to us. but you can't promise a cure because God never said we had the right to do that. So just be aware of that one. And it's so easy to at least infer that. You know, I'm going to pray over your shoulder because your shoulder's had reconstructive surgery. And you must say, Lord, heal this shoulder. Yeah. Just be sensitive to what the words might be interpreted. And remember, the way you say things is not the way they are received. Okay, so what is the truth? The truth is the way it is received, not the way you said it. And so you need to be just very conscious of being careful in your discussions with them. A theology of obedience. Okay, you're commissioned through the chaplaincy, through your worshiping community, to be their spokesperson to the sick in the hospital. Not the sick from your community, but to all the sick in the hospital. That's your commission. And your obedience is to that commission, that you will encounter with anybody that's in the ward and give them the time. So you don't sort of say, oh, look, that's the one that we're always warned about, particularly if you're a white male, is you never seek to offer your hand to a Muslim woman. And I can recall remembering that it's just one of those important lessons that I had to learn. And yet the first time I went into the hospital and met with a Muslim woman, she held out her hand for me to hold. You know, and I had to ask her, do you want me to hold your hand? And her answer was yes. So all things that get said are said in how's the word, in good faith. You walk into the ward and it changes by reality. So, but that whenever you, for example, when it comes to holding hands, it's really the no-no. You don't touch a patient, but a patient can touch you if they want to. So rather than your hand going to hold the hand of the patient, you put your hand in a position where if the patient chooses to, they can hold your hand. And then when you're holding their hand, you are sensitive to them wanting release. You don't hold on to their hand so tight that they never have a chance to let go. All right? Hold it by all means. Put a reassuring thumb over the top of the handball, but be sensitive to their desire to release. And early on, I used to try and release myself and would feel whether they wanted me to carry on holding my hand. But the social interaction is that if one person tries to release, the other one will release automatically. And that pertains here too. But it's not you to hold first, it's them to hold first. Okay, so we're getting on a little bit. It's a theology of witness, and you're a witness to the love of God. Okay? You're a witness to the love of God and the assurance that you can give to them that God loves them irrespective of what they may have said, thought, complained about, is a real assurance for every patient, particularly those who are not particularly religious. We have a little bit look about religion and spirituality now. And the last one of these theologies is the theology of servanthood. So just be aware that we are servant leaders with the accent on the servant. We are the ones that are there for serving Christ and serving Christ in them. Okay. Now, probably one of the most important things we're going to do tonight. A social visit and a pastoral visit. So there's a lovely chart in your manual that fills these out a bit, because on a screen you can't put all the words in. But the objective of your conversations when you're encountering somebody is to move from the left to the right. Okay? So when you're looking at the social conversation or the social visit, you know, you're talking about things that don't really matter. How's the weather? You know, what kind of motor car have you got? How many children have you got? All those are very pleasant social conversations. You're keeping it really congenial. You're making sure that the atmosphere is pleasant. You're providing comfort by not talking about the elephant in the room. If you know how often I say to a person, I'm not going to ask you how you are, because if you were well, you wouldn't be in hospital.
Mhm.
You know, so you right out front, you say, look, I know you're unwell. You want to tell me about what it is, and you allow them to proceed in the conversation. Sharing stories. This is so easy. It's a very normal conversation. I want you to think about the barbecue experience. You know, one person says that they saw a movie. Oh boy, you got to tell them about a movie you saw. You know? Or somebody went to a concert, and you got to think back to the concert you went to, or you went to the same concert and you share the stories of what happened at that concert.
Mm.
So sharing stories is definitely social, but not pastoral.
Mm.
You talk about things that what should be. Gosh, this government is such and such and such and such and such. It should be, you know, or whatever you choose about. Or my gosh, what's the mayor of Auckland doing now? He should be doing something. So it's something outside of the two of you that is being discussed, and it's very non-threatening. Generalizing more or less summarizes all that. You're not talking specifically about the person that needs to be there. Helpful by being entertaining. I've got to tell you what happened to me yesterday. I had a call to visit a mother and was told that the mother was forgetful and that I would have to make sure that she remembered that I visited her and prayed with her. And I was told that she was the mother of 8 children. So I got down to see her, and there was a man talking to her, holding her hand and chatting. And he looked young. So I called him her son. Boy, did she give it to me. This is not my son, this is my husband.
Oh no, that's terrible.
So I said to her, look, have a good look at my mouth. And I lifted up my mask. She said, look how big it is, I said. She said, why? I said, because I just put my foot in it.
That's great.
Yeah.
Oh no.
But you see, then it became a conversation that was entertaining. Now, she was fairly down. And so I couldn't really get her to talk in front of her husband. So I was there for about 40 minutes, just making the two of them laugh to try and lift the atmosphere for them. You know, so she would complain about her suffering, and I would say, well, he's sitting right there next to you, he can't feel a thing.
Mm-hmm.
In a way to try and get her to break out of the melancholy that can so easily envelop a person in hospital. I was going to see her this afternoon. Unfortunately, I never got there. I'll go and see her again tomorrow. But the idea is that there are some times that you can be helpful by entertaining, but it's social, not pastoral. If you're talking about religions, social. And if you're talking about people in general, social. Now, if we go across to that one, a partial conversation is where you're talking about the person. What's going on in the patient's life. Okay? You're not trying to avoid the tension that you might feel in the conversation. So if they're saying to you, I don't want to be in the hospital anymore, that's tension. You just let that be. You don't try and ameliorate it. You don't just sort of say, oh, don't worry about it. It doesn't matter. You rather let the tension hang and saying, what are you going to do about it? So they're confronting that tension, but you don't let it pass, you confront it. And then if you're thinking that you're providing comfort through avoiding, no, that's not the case. You've got to get them to face the issues that they're, and that's hard. You know, if someone says to you, you know, I'm really upset because my husband's just left me. Well, you're not there to say, oh, bad luck, old girl. You know, you're getting there to say, well, now hold on a second. Have you tried to work out why? Do you want to tell me what happened? So you're making sure that they're facing the issues, because it's the issue that stays with them when you've gone. Right? And it's the issue that will continue to play on their minds when you're gone. So your role is to help them to elevate or raise the issue to the point of being able to talk about it. Understanding and empathetic in the way you talk about each issue, that's really important. Very, very pastoral. Okay. You're not trying to be polite. Look, politeness comes as an automatic part of everybody's life. I accept that. But you're not trying to be polite and play down whatever the issue is. You talk about what is, right? So not what should be, what is happening in your life, what is the problem, and then, okay, what should it be? What should it be? So you're leading that conversation on. And the next one there, being specific. That's very personal. Again, sometimes when you're in a situation like that, it feels like you're treading on their feelings or treading on their toes. Nonetheless, that's where you've got to tread. But you're not treading in the sense that you're putting the thing into the conversation. You're allowing them to put their feet and their toes under your feet. Okay, so you're not dismissing the issues that are coming. And the help is as a result of the conversation being particularly intimate. Now, we're not talking about sexuality or sexual intimacy. We're talking about a depth of understanding or the depth of sharing that's coming from the patient. Okay, and your encouragement of that sharing is to help them raise every aspect of the issue, not to gain some sort of a story to tell at dinner the next night. Remember that when you're talking religion, you're talking about God and the patient's relationship to God. Now, I put God in capital letters because I'm coming from a Christian point of view, but whoever the person holds as their higher being is what's inferred by that word God in that statement. So their relationship with their higher power is what you and you're getting them to focus on that. Look, for the most part, they're talking the Christian God, but there will be people that deny God entirely, and that's entirely their prerogative. And when you're talking about relationships, you're talking about significant relationships. You're not talking about how well they get on with the man that picks up the rubbish box each week. You're talking about the relationship between husband and wife, or mother and child, or something along those lines. Okay, so broad picture, you're trying to get the conversation to get onto a pastoral level, and in time that'll come. Okay, the last little bit that we're going to look at is religion and spirituality. And I found this article on the web, and the website is there for you to look at if you wish to. It's a guy called Chopra, who's a well-renowned thinker. But he said some things here which I think are really important, because everybody is spiritual in some way. Okay, but not everybody is religious. And so I'd like to read his analogy as to how to tell or how to help identify where a person is. So one way that might help you to understand the relationship between spirituality and religion is to imagine a game of football. The rules, referees, other players, and the field markings help guide you as you play the game. And that's a similar way that religion might guide you to find your spirituality. Okay? So religion leads you to a spirituality, but you don't have to have a religion to have a spirituality. Okay? Kicking the ball around the park without having to play on a field with all the rules and regulations can also give you fulfillment and fun, and still expresses the essence of the game. That's similar to spirituality in life. It's providing you with the essence without what some people will call the structure of a religious denomination. That, my good friends, is our bit for tonight. So I hope you're okay with that.
Yes, that's great.
Right, I've got one
Yeah,
more
that's been
slide.
great. Thank you.
One more slide.
Thank you.
What's the truth? Who am I? What do I want? What is my purpose? What's the meaning of life? Religion, spirituality, that's the big question. So I'll leave those with you because those get dealt with in time too. Any comments or questions? Well,
Do we
next week.
do any
Sorry,
assessment? Do we need to do any assignment or assessment on this, the whole entire course?
do you have to do anything? What, Rufus?
Assessment?
Yes. You get an assessment each week. You tell the person who presents whether you did a good job or not.
Ah,
I think you
you
passed
did
with flying colors. Yeah.
You go
Oh,
great.
it's fabulous. It truly is. Thank you very much.
No,
Thank
my
you.
pleasure. No, Rufus, there's no assessment. What happens is that as you come in towards the end of your training, you start to go into the wards, and
Yep.
we will go with you into the
Okay.
wards. So,
Yep.
for the first couple of times, you will see either a chaplain or an experienced VCA engaging with people. So you will get to see
Yep.
examples of what we try to teach.
Yep.
And then you'll grow in confidence and you'll be able to say to us, look, I think I want to try on my own. And then you'll try on your own and you'll come back and tell us what happened. Okay.
Yep.
And
Yep.
if something rises in that discussion that we think isn't quite 100%, I'll say to you, now look, Rufus, you spoke to Jimmy so-and-so and you mentioned the fact that he was, and I'm picking something totally silly, a coward. Right? Okay. I'm going to have to go back to Jimmy so-and-so and just explain to him that you didn't mean coward.
Yeah.
What you meant was someone that wasn't prepared to do what you wanted him to do, or whatever. Again, unlikely to happen, but if it does happen, we will get to you and start to modify the way you ask the questions. And that largely comes from you asking us, this is what happened to me today. What could I have done differently? Okay. We then get onto a formal thing, which is called a PER, a PER, a patient encounter review. That's when you write something down. And I don't want you to worry about it right now, but you actually record the conversation as best you remember it, with an idea to saying, I want to talk about this particular part of the conversation or that particular part of the conversation. I'm going to just stop sharing so that we can.
I was going to say, Mark, do you let us loose without someone sort of being with us, or do you observe our?
We will observe you for a while.
Yeah.
Okay. We will be with you mainly because it's all very well as going through all the theory with you and giving you an understanding of the theory. That's great. But what we really want you to be feeling is confident in yourself.
Sure.
And so we will go with you for you to be the lead in the encounter for as long as you want us to be there. And if it's not us, it's going to be one of the existing VCAs. And only when you tell us, look, I'm feeling confident to go in on my own,
Yep.
then we'll say, let's try. If we're not confident in you at that time, we'll say, no, hold on a second. Let's just go a
Yes.
couple of times more, one more time together. Yeah.
Mm.
There have been some people, I mean, look, I've said this before, most of you are so well experienced with life experiences. You don't need to have your hand held for an awful long time. The shortest, 1 day that we went in together, longest 5 days. So if you're 6 days, so what? If you're 3 days, great. It's when you feel confident,
Mhm.
because that's, it's like going into the water the first time to swim on your own. There's no wings on.
Mm.
So that's the basic. And when you get to a per, I just don't have one handy that I can just show you. But you write down the conversation, and then if you're assigned to, well, you and your supervisor will discuss what happened in that conversation. Yeah. And the discussion is aimed at how could you have done something differently? And it's not even how could you have done something better, unless you decide that the different way is better, right? It's not us deciding that it's better. So there's no assessment of you other than the fact that if we see you as being competent to engage with people, then we'll put you forward for commissioning. So at the end of the training, at the end of the practices in the rounds, in the wards, we will put your name forward basically to ICHC regional manager to say, we would like this person commissioned. You go through a commissioning ceremony, which is really quite a beautiful ceremony, where you are commissioned, and then you are part of the chaplaincy team officially. Although you'll be feeling a bit like it long before that. So I'm looking forward to all that happening soon. It seems a long time to the end of the training. I hope you all stick it out. Now, next week, you'll see Oliver. So Oliver will be with you, and I'm just trying to see my training schedule. I think Oliver's with you because your Perry is still overseas. Yeah, so Oliver is with you for the next 5 weeks.
Mm.
Well, I hope. Don't get bored.
Yeah. Right.
Oliver's very passionate, so I hope all things go well. And I believe he's good. I mean, when I did my training, he showed me one of the areas, and it was a great.
Yeah.
So next 5 weeks, then you'll get a Perry. Oh no, I come back. So in 6 weeks' time, you're going to get me. Then you'll get a Perry after a while. So enjoy Oliver for the next 5 weeks. I'm sure you'll have a wonderful time with him. Remember, 100% attendance, which means that if you miss a lesson, you've got to get the recording link, and you just go and visit and look at that again. Okay?
Yeah.
Pastor, are you happy with tonight? You can nod and just tell me yes or no. Mickey, how are you doing?
목사님, 이야기하세요. 오늘 이해하셨어요? 이해하셨으면 yes라고 이야기하세요. 그거 소리 안 나는 거 이거 지우고 소리 내세요.
소리 하는 걸로.
예.
네, 다 이해했습니다. Understand. 예.
Thank you very much. Hong, you okay? Fantastic. Get well. And Legion, I don't see you, but I presume you're there. And MH Song, are all happy about that. Eh? So please, you know who to talk to if you're in trouble. So please make sure that all of you are feeling very comfortable. God bless you all.
Thank you, Mark.
May your lives just be wonderfully filled with love of God. God, see you all.
God bless
Thank
you,
you,
too,
Mark.
Mark. Thank you
Yes,
for
mate.
your
We're going to
Yes.
see you tomorrow.
See
Pastor.
you.
God bless everyone. Cheers. Yeah,
Bye.
hopefully, Mark.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.